So in previous video we completed about middlewares. We see how to write middlewares and how to use them. In today's video, let us take the concept of middleware up a notch and start learning about user authentication. So when doing the user authentication, we are going to heavily rely on middleware functions. Here we will do the JWT token validation for the user verification. So for that, what we'll do, we'll quickly install few package. So I will take a new terminal instance and I will say npm install bcrypt. So this library will help us in generating the password hash and its verification. Then there is a library called JSON web token. This library will help us in generating the token and verifying the token. So as and when we start writing the code, I will explain how to use this library for doing encryption and authentication. So let us quickly install this one. Okay, so this is done. Now in order to have the user authentication, what we need, the user should be stored in the database, and for that what we need, the MongoDB schema, and to access the methods or to access the data from the MongoDB, we will write the repository and then we will write the service, like how we have been doing for the movies and participants. So we will follow same structure, but here we will not write the complete CRUD functionality. We will just write the user register, that is create user and user login. So we will write only these two methods in the service layer. Let us start implementing the schema, and before that what I will do, in constant, if you see, we are creating this kind of array that we are using in the schema as enum type. So here also I want to add another array called as user roles in the user schema. So what this user role will do, this will help us in doing authorization later. Now what we are doing, authentication, later we will do authorization, but we have to build the groundwork from now itself. So I will create another constant called user role. So there will be three user roles: guest, moderator and admin. So later we will see how we can give different types of role based access to our APIs. So for that, what I will do, I will quickly add the constant. Now after the constant is added, what I want to do is I want to create one more constant called default user role. So by default, when somebody is creating an account, it should always default to guest user, because admin user will have the highest privilege, and as an API developer, I don't want someone to have the admin role by default. It should always be the least privilege role. So for that, what I will do, I will add another constant called default user role. And what will be its value? Its value will be user roles 0th index. That means the guest. So this is how you actually write code that is highly configurable. So if tomorrow another role comes, it will be very easy just to change one index here, right? We don't have to change the service layer or the database layer or anything. I'm just keeping everything in the constant and making it configurable. So that's how you actually write the production level code. You have to make it as easy as possible for future updates. So I will save this one. Then let us quickly write the schema. So I'll go to repository. Inside this schema folder, I'll create a new file and name it as user schema.js. Then first thing what I need to import Mongoose. Then what I need the user role and the default user role. So I'll import that also. This is done. Then what I need to do, I'll create the user schema. So the user schema is created. Now what fields I want to add? Let me add name, then user ID, then password, then role field to this user schema. So we have already seen how to add the fields in the schema. So I'll move quickly. So here name I have added, user ID I have added, and here if you see there is a unique field. That means this field should be unique. That means no two user will have the same user ID. Then password and then role. So this is of enum type user role that we have previously seen, and default value is the default user role. Then what we will do, we will create the model out of this and export it. This also we have seen previously. Now here I want to add few things. So this is the basic schema that we have completed. Now on top of this schema I want to attach few methods. So how can I do that? So instead of me writing a helper function, say for example to do validation or to generate the hash, what I can do, I can add this method at the schema level itself. So how can I do that? So say for example I want to add a function called compare passwords. So ideally if I am writing it at the service level, I have to send two passwords and then I will do the comparison. Now here instead what I am doing, I am attaching the compare method in the user schema itself, so that it will be easy when I am implementing the service for me to do the comparison. So for this what I will do, I will say user schema dot methods, okay, dot I'll add a method called compare password. Okay, this will be an async function that will take a password as a parameter. Then what it will do, it will return bcrypt, and to use bcrypt what I have to do, I have to import it. So I will come here, import from, so import bcrypt from bcrypt library. Then what I will do, so bcrypt dot compare, okay, what this will compare here, what is the user's current password. So to access that what I will do, this dot password. So what this will refer to, this field, and I will compare this with the password that is being sent to this function. Okay, so this will do the comparison between the two passwords. One of them is within the object. Similarly, what I can do, I can attach a method called generate token and verify token. So I'll say user schema dot methods dot generate auth token equals to function. Now what this will return, this will return JWT. Now what is JWT? JSON web token. So for that what we will do, we will import it. So import JWT from JSON web token, then JWT dot sign. Okay, this is the function name which will generate the auth token. So this will take two parameters. One is the data that I want to create the JWT token for. So what data I want? I want to add the ID. I'll say ID. So what ID value will be, this one, this dot underscore ID. So this is the MongoDB user ID, and what field I can take? I can take any field, say for example username, role, anything, but the bare minimum that I need for us to later identify this user, that I'll generate the token, so that when I verify the token, I'll be able to decode this object and get the user information. So what else I can add? Let us add user ID. User ID, what value this will be? This dot user ID. So this is the object that I want to tokenize. Then what else it needs? It need a JWT secret. So from where it will get the secret? Of course it will get the secret from the environment variable. So what I will do, I will come to my env file and here I will add a JWT token. And remember, if somebody has access to this token, they will be able to verify your token on your behalf and it can be easily misused. So for this purpose, always keep this JWT token in a very safe place. Okay, and here I am storing in the environment variable. So I will save this one, and here in the user schema, so this is my first object or the first parameter to the sign method. The second parameter will be the token. So I will say process.env dot this value. I will copy and add it here. Then it will take a configuration object, and here what value I want to pass? I want to pass expires in. So this token is valid for how long, or after how much time it will expire. So I will say 1 hour. Then so we have added method to generate the token. Then what we will do, we will add a method to verify the token. So user schema dot methods dot verify auth token. This will be a function and it will take the token. Then what I will do, I will wrap it inside a try catch block so that if the token verification throws error, I'll be able to easily catch it and I will return null. So here I will return something. So I will return JWT dot verify what? Verify token. How to verify this token? Of course it needs this token secret to be passed so that the same object that it encoded or signed with this JWT signature or JWT token secret, I'll pass the same JWT token secret so that it can do the verification. Now if for whatever reason in the meantime this JWT token changes between the signing and the verification, then of course your JWT token verification will fail. So always keep that in mind. So I will return the verify return value. So this return value, what this will return? This will return this object. Whatever we generated the token for this object, I can pass n number of values here. So that will be signed and sent, and when we are doing the verification, we will get the same object back. So the caller of this function will get this object which will have the user underscore ID, that is the Mongo ID, and the normal user ID that we have in the database. Now, so we have attached 3 functions. Now one more thing I want to add. Important thing, when you are storing password of a user, you should not store it in the plain text. User can add a password in the plain text, but it is our responsibility to convert it to a hash. Now what is a hash? Hash is a one-way function. So if you create a hash of a string, you cannot get back the original string. Once you hashed it with the algorithm, it is done. You cannot get it back. And the opposite thing is encryption. Encryption, you can decrypt with a public key or a private key and you can get back the original string. But for hash, you don't get the original string. So when storing the user password, we don't encrypt it, we hashed it. We always hash it. That's why if you see, when you try to recover your password through the forget password link, they don't send you your original password. If they store your original password, they can send you your original password after verifying your authenticity. But instead, what they do, they send you a private link to reset your password, because even they don't have the original password that you have set. Otherwise, if the database is compromised or hacked, your password will be easily leaked, right? So it is always hashed and you cannot get back your original string. So there are methods in which we compare hash to hash, not your plain text password with plain text password. Okay. So what we will do, we will write a pre-save hook. Now what is this? So MongoDB gives us some hooks or some kind of middlewares. This get executed when the user is either created or updated or deleted, right? Based on what kind of hook we are writing. One such hook is a pre-save hook. So before doing the save, what we can do, we can modify the request, right? So what we will do, I will say user schema dot pre. Pre means before an operation, this middleware function will be executed. Now pre of what? Pre of save. So that means before save, you run this function. Okay. Now this function is an async function, and this function has a next parameter. When we So in the regular middleware, in the express middleware, we have seen the importance of next function. So if you don't call this function, it will not go to the next line of middleware or routes. Here also same concept. Once you are done with your function, you call the next function and it will call the next line of middleware. So here next, I'll add this condition: if this dot is modified password. So if the password is modified, then what I will do, this dot password equals to await decrypt dot hash what, this dot password, and how many round of hashing it will do. So the more round, the more secure it is, but the more computation time it will take to generate the hash as well as to do the validation. So semicolon, and here it should be hash. Okay. Now what is the role of this is modified? Say for example, you are trying to update the user password or update the user field, or say for example you want to change the user role, right? In that case, okay, let us take the example of you are trying to change the user role. In that case, you are only going to change the user role. In that case, is your password modified? No. So only if the password is modified or when it is newly created, then only go for this hashing. So if you are just trying to update the user role or the user name or some date of birth, something like that, in that case, the password field is not modified. So in that case, we should call this function only when the password is modified, right? Because this hashing is a computationally expensive method. So this is modified is added as a if condition before doing the hashing. And what we will do, we will call the next method. So what we have done till now, we have created the mongoose schema. Then in that schema, we have added a hook, that is the pre-save hook, and we have added method to compare the password, generate auth token, and verify auth token. Now let us go to the repository. Now let us quickly implement the corresponding repository. So here in the repository folder, I will say new file and I will call it as user repository. story.js. First thing what I need to import the schema. So I will say import user from user schema, and it should be .js. Then let me first write a method to get a user by ID. So this we are going to use when we are doing a login or register. Say for example, we are doing a register. We have to first verify whether the user ID that is sent to us for registration, if that already exists or not. So for that, what we will do, we'll write a method get user by ID that we will use for login and registration. So we'll see that flow, but for now, let us write the export. Let us write the get user by ID. So export const get user by ID, and this is going to be an async function which will take user ID and arrow function. Then const user equals to await user dot find 1. I will just find 1. Find 1 with what will be the query? I will pass user ID as user ID. So now what is this user ID? This user ID is your schema property. So this user ID should match this user ID. And when you have the key and value pair name same, you can just use 1. Okay, so find 1 user ID. That means find 1 with this user ID. Then if not user, we will say return null. Otherwise, return the user that we have found just now. Then what else we will do? We will export const create user by ID. This will be an async function. What value this will take? Name, user ID and password. And so if you remember, there are four fields: name, user ID, password and role. Role is always taking the default value as guest. So I'm not passing role here. I'll not even allow user to pass the role, because if I do that, they can always send admin. So I'll not pass it. Always it will default to guest. So what I will say, const user equals to new user, and it will take name, user ID and password. So we have previously seen this will just create a in-memory object. Then what do we have to do? User dot save. Then only it will actually go to the database. Then we will return the user. Then so get user by ID and create user by ID is done. Now we will add another method called validate user password. Export const validate user password. This will be an async function. So what this will take? User ID and password. So if you see a typical login flow, what value we enter into the UI field? User ID and password. So I'll also do the same thing. It is just taking the user ID and password. So first from this user ID, I have to find the user, and for that I have already added the method here. So what I can do, const user equals to await get user by ID, and what value it will take? User ID. Then what I can do, I will return user dot. Now what I will add, I will say compare password, and I will pass password, and here I am missing an arrow. Now if you see from where this compare for password function is coming, so if you go to user schema, here we have in the user schema we have added a method called compare password. right? If we have not added this one, how would we do the comparison? So this is the scenario when we don't have the user.compare password. So what we will do here, we are using bcrypt. So I will say bcrypt.compare, compare which password? User dot password. So this password will come from the user object, and the other password will be this password that is coming from the function parameter. So this would have been the flow, but instead what I have done, just to make it convenient and keep all the validation at the schema level, what I have done, user dot compare password, and it will take this password. Now how the comparison happens is internal implementation of the schema, that as a repository writer I am not worried. Tomorrow if the logic has to be changed or if the schema has to be modified, the compare password will be updated, and it will not update your service layer or even the repository layer, right? So this is the advantage that we are getting. And also if you do this, this is also not wrong. Okay, if you want, you can do this kind of bcrypt comparison. Okay, so I'll remove this line. Then what we will do, we will add another method called generate token. So basically validate user password, and that method that we'll write, that is generate auth token, it's basically a wrapper of this schema method implementation. Okay, so I will say export const generate auth token equals to async user id and arrow function. Then what I will do, I will get the user id or the user from this user id. I'll copy and paste it here. Then I will say return user dot generate auth token. So this method is nothing but this schema method generate auth token. So this will take this dot id and user id to generate the token. Now this being done, what is the next thing? Let us do the user service. So repository is done. We'll come to service and add a method called user service.js. So here we will add two methods, that is register and login. And before that, let me import all the repository methods. So I have imported all the repository method. Let me first write the register method. Export register equals to async function, and this will take request and response, and this will be an arrow function. Now first what I have to do, I have to take the name, user id and password from the request body. So I'll say const name, user id and password. This will, I will destructure from request dot body. Now when I'm doing registration, first I have to check if a user already exists for the given user id. So const check existing user equals to await get user by id, and I will pass the user id. Then if I find this user id, that means I should not proceed further because this user id already exists. So if the user already exists, what I will do, I will set the response dot status. Now can you tell me what will be the status here? Here status will be 409, that is conflicting. So 409 is HTTP conflict. That means the resource cannot be created because of a conflict, right? So because, why the conflict? Because now why is the conflict? Because the user already exists. So I will say JSON, then I will pass a message user already exists, and I will return. So I will not allow the user to register. Then if the user doesn't exist, so what I will do, I'll say const new user equals to await create user by id, and this is taking name, user id and password. Now where we are doing the password hashing, so if you go inside the create user by id, which is in the repository, here we are doing the user save. Now on the pre-save hook, we have attached a middleware function. So this, if it is not modified, this will do the hashing. So we, from the user service point of view, we don't have to worry about hashing. So all we have to do is just call the method and we are done. So we will create new user. Then if for whatever reason, if this new user is a falsy value, that means null or undefined or something, then what value we will send? res.status of 500, because there was a internal server error. 500 is internal server error. That means something went wrong while trying to create the user. It could be database related issue, or it could be your server was unreachable or some validation failed. So we'll just keep the status as 500 and we will send a message. We'll add a simple message, could not create user. So 500 is the server related error, and we will return. Otherwise response dot status, what status I will attach? 201, that is resource created. And JSON, what value I will add? I will add the new user. So this is the register flow. Now quickly add the login flow. So const export const login, which will be an async method, and this will take request and response. This will be an arrow function, and I will first extract user ID and password from request.body. Then here we checked if the user exists, right? Here also we will do the same checking if the user exists or not. Now here the purpose is completely different. First in the register we checked if the user exists, then throw error. Here if the user doesn't exist, then throw the error, because this is login flow. I am expecting the user already exists, then only do the password verification, because if you see password verification, it will compare the hash and it is a computationally expensive function. So here I'll check the complete opposite. If the user doesn't exist, then throw error. So here if not of check existing user, then what I will say, response dot status of 404 not found. That means this user doesn't exist in our database. So I will say message user not found, and I will return from here. Then what if the user exists? Then we will do password match. Const is match equals to await. Then we have a method validate user password. So it will take user ID and password. Then if not is match, if this doesn't match, then what we will do? We will say response dot status. What will be the status here? 403 unauthorized. that means you are no longer authorized to proceed, because either you have added a wrong password, So here message, JSON message, what we will do, password did not match. Okay, then return. Now here is one interesting security concern that you should check. Here in the first user authentication check, we are saying user not found. Now in the second check, we are saying password did not match. Now what is the problem here? Here you are sending very specific message. What is the problem? Now for example, somebody is trying to hack into your system. If you say user not found, that's okay, but if you send password did not match, that means if somebody is trying to bypass your system or trying to hack into your system, and if he gets a message password did not match, that means for sure user matched, user ID matched, or such a user exists. So that will give him more bandwidth to do his mischievous stuff, which I don't want. I don't want to tell him, okay, the user ID is right, but your password is wrong, or your password is right, but the user ID is wrong. So here I should always give generic message saying user ID or password did not match. Right? I know that user ID did not match or the password did not match, but the person who is trying to access, he should not know which one it did not match. It is his responsibility to give the correct user ID or password. If we give specific information, hackers will be able to misuse this information, right? So here what I will do, I'll simply say user ID or password did not match. And here also I'll copy the same thing. Here I don't want to be specific, like what did not match. I don't want to tell him, okay, user ID is correct, but your password is not correct. No, it is your responsibility to give me correct ID and password. If it did not match, I'll say user ID or password did not match. Now you figure out what you are adding wrong, right? Otherwise, go for password reset and user ID reset flow. Of course, that is not the scope of this video, but I'm just giving you the information. So these are the security precautions that you should take when you are giving a message. And if you want, here also you can give the status as same. So I'm giving the status same, right? If something is missing, either user ID or password, it did not match, then user has to figure out what we are doing, what he is doing wrong. Then so password also matched, user also exists. Now what we have to do, we have to generate a token for the user that we will send it to him, so that in the subsequent request for the protected resource, he will send us back this token so that we can validate the user's authenticity. So what we will do after password matching and user matching, what we will do, we will generate the token, await generate auth token, and what I will do, I will pass the user ID. Then if not of token, then what I will do, I will borrow some line from here. So this is a 500 status, something is wrong from the server end. So here could not, I will say log in user. Now here also we should not say could not create the token, because if we give that information, somebody can misuse by having the knowledge that this API uses a JWT based authentication, right? There are many ways of authentication, right? There could be cookie based authentication, session based authentication, OTP based authentication. So give as much less information as possible to the user. So simply could not log in the user. It's okay, it's our mistake, but still when I say our mistake means something is wrong at the server end. So here we'll simply say could not log in the user. You should not say could not generate the JWT token, because that will give user information that they are not intended to know, right? So give as least information as possible, minimum, for the user to understand, okay, what is happening wrong, but not as much information as they will be able to start misusing the system. So once token is generated, I will say return, I will say response.status of 200, and JSON, I will pass the token and I will pass it as an object, so that we will not get the token, but we will get a key value pair. Key will be token and value will be the actual token. So this flow is also done. So what we have done till now, we have added the schema, and inside the schema we have added hooks and our own methods. Then on top of that we have added a repository and some wrapper methods. On this surface, what we have done, we have added the register and login method. So we will stop this video here, and in the next video we will attach the service to the router, and then we will do a user registration. After that we will do a login and get the token, and we will write the logic to do the token validation.